So today we are very pleased to have with us the Venerable David Picken, who is currently the Archdeacon of Lancaster, which means he's my boss. David was ordained in 1990 after moving from a teaching career. He was born in Staffordshire, studied in London and then in Lincoln. He's worked in Chichester Diocese, Worcester Diocese, Sutherland Nottingham Diocese, before finally moving to be with us over here in Blackburn. He's an honorary canon of Christ Church, Oxford. He's been a parish priest, an area dean, a hospital chaplain, and is a Manchester United supporter. I'll leave that one with you. David is married to Kathy, who is a teacher, and it's lovely to have you here with us today, David. Thank you very much for agreeing to be interviewed with us. It's a bit strange at the moment because you started as Archdeacon and then we went almost virtually straight into lockdown, didn't we? So we've not really, seen you around, obviously, not in the flesh anyway. We've seen you online, but not in the flesh. So it's been quite tough, really. It must be quite a bizarre situation, really, for you, I guess, at the moment. But it's lovely to have you with us.
Thank you.
So tell me, how are you coping with lockdown?
Well, personally, it doesn't. At a personal level, it doesn't bother me individually that much at all, because I'm quite an introvert character, so I'm quite happy with my own company. Although obviously I've got Kathy here and the dogs, but so at one level that's fine. We live in a beautiful place and enjoying that. There are lots of folks for whom it's much tougher for me, and I wouldn't say things have been quiet, but it has enabled me to have a bit more of a space to reflect, and I think that's that has been good.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can almost be doing the same amount of work, but when we're doing it from home, we don't have to travel to the venue.
Exactly.
So we've automatically gained a little bit of time in that respect, haven't we, when everything's sort of combined. So there has been a bit more downtime, even though we've been busy, but which is,
and of course that's a huge issue in this role, because it's living where I do just south of Lancaster. Not everybody would know that, I guess, but it's 32 miles to Blackburn, so it's quite a journey just to go to the Darson offices, never mind wherever else I might be going. So yeah, right.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me, what are you missing most about lockdown?
Just some of the normal things in life. So you've intimated I like sport, whether people like my team or not, so I'm missing some of that. Whatever the positives are about it at the moment, but I am missing that, and I'm missing the chance just to get out and spend time with folks and get to know my new area well.
Okay, so how have you managed to feed your spirituality during the lockdown? Because it's really hard for us, isn't it? We can't meet as a group of believers, and we can't take communion. On Sunday, with it being Pentecost, we would have done anointing or offered anointing, and obviously we can't do that. And so it's very different times, isn't it? How have you found your own spirituality during this time?
I love praying as a walk, so I've had the opportunity to do quite a bit of walking. The dogs and I have been exploring the footpaths around here, got to know them quicker than I might have done in other circumstances. I also, Kathy and I do celebrate the Eucharist every day at 5:00, and have offered that so that we'll do that as a, prayer intentions, and so folks who wish to ask for prayers can let us know, and we take that, and that's very deeply within my kind of background that I'm able to do that. Don't do it usually, so it's been a great gift to be able to do that. And one of the lovely things that's happened actually is the bishops and the archdeacons and Darson secretary and the dean, when he can, twice a week, are meeting for morning prayer and are reflecting on the readings together. And of course we wouldn't usually be able to do that, so that's been lovely. So there's been a nice collegiality around that, which has helped me settle in.
Yeah, good. We just have to find different ways of doing things, don't we, I think? Yeah, I know we've been doing morning prayer, and we've had so many more people would, that joined us to morning prayer would never normally have done. But of course, people are at home. Lots of those people who are joining us are normally at work and would never be able to do that. So I guess, we've just got to find new ways, haven't we?
Yep.
So you've obviously moved around quite a bit. You've been in various different dioceses. Where do you consider home? Where's home for you?
I think it would still be where I was born and brought up. I mean, when I go back there and see my dad, it feels like home.
Yeah.
It's just one of those places that you just have so many memories with and connections with and so on and so forth. So in that sense it is. But I mean, like you know the lifestyle, and I mean, it's so important that we move around. We therefore, wherever I am has to be home as well, in a very important sense. And so whether they're happy with it or not, I'm an honorary Lancastrian now, and and committed to making this my home while I'm here, and that's a really important part of our ministry, isn't it?
Yeah, of course it is. And you do get very involved in your local community really quickly, don't you? In a way that you probably wouldn't in any other walk of life, I guess, but which is wonderful, really. So tell me something a bit about your faith journey. How did you come to faith? Where did you start?
The fascinating thing for me, looking back, is I always had an interest in things about religion, and I put it that way because I wouldn't say that was particularly a religious questing or a faith quest as such. It just, I never cease to be amazed by folks who don't realise that religion's really quite important in the world politics, because it's obviously what makes so many of us tick.
Yeah.
And I think I saw that from an early age, and so was interested in it. I mean, I was nominally brought up in the Church of England. I was baptised, very occasionally went to church with Nan. Although I did go to a Church of England school, and part of my commitment to education is my thankfulness for that, really, because it was a very special thing for me. And I met some lovely, godly people through that. And I could just see, I suppose, that whether I'd have put it this way at the time, I could see that was making a difference to them. And, I was attracted to what that was. But I think I studied religion through to A-level, religious studies at A-level. And it wasn't really until I went away to university that I started to take that to another level. But meeting some key characters, as for so many of us, was critical. So when I got to know Kathy, she's a committed Christian and was at the time. So I'd start going to church with her, and indeed some of the friends that she shared a large house with. That was important. I went off at the end of my degree to do a teacher training year and lived with a very committed Christian guy who was a big influence on me. All those things leading up to a point where I thought I needed to take this seriously and do something about it myself. So by this point, I would have said I'd decided to commit to the Christian faith. So I was in Canterbury training to teach, and it was pretty obvious at the time, really. I walked into Canterbury Cathedral and said to a verger, I need to talk to somebody about confirmation. So they pointed me in the right direction, and things moved on from there, really. And then we start getting into the whole question about, calling to ordination. But the faith story, that's really how it started out. And also, I suppose, being somebody for whom the sacraments are really important. This is confession time from the Archdeacon, because I broke the rules. Because we were walking past a lovely little parish church one summer's evening, and the bells were ringing. They were just about to start the service, and I went in, and they were just about to have a Holy Communion service. And when the words "draw near with faith" was spoken, I just knew that was a personal thing, and it was like literally an altar call, if you will. So I went forward and received Holy Communion, even though I hadn't been confirmed at that point. But as the prayer book puts it, I was desirous, clearly, at that stage.
Yeah. I'm not sure that the disciples were confirmed either at the Last Supper, so I think you're probably in good company. So tell us a little bit more about that call then into ordination. Obviously, you were trained as a teacher, you began in that career. What then happened to make you change careers? How did you feel that God was calling you then into ordination?
Yeah, I suppose it was part of that year in Canterbury. I mean, the irony, of course, is I walked past Canterbury Cathedral any number of times and hardly ever went in there, but that's life, isn't it? You know, but it was part of that year. It gave me time to reflect upon what I was doing. I'd thought from the age of about 14 that I was going to be a teacher. So this was not, you know, this wasn't drifting into this at all. So it came as quite a shock when through that year I started to get a few questions. At the end of that year, we got married. And then in my first year of married life, we were, you know, part of a parish church. And I just knew at this point that that niggling feeling that so many of those of us who've been called to ordination would understand. You just know you've got to do something about that.
Yeah.
And so I went off and had a chat with the vicar, and things took off from there. But the thing that sealed the deal for me was, as a teacher, we joined a darts league. And on Friday night, we used to go out and have something to eat, have a few drinks, and play darts in this league. And it was walking home from a darts match when, clear as day, God spoke to me in a way that God doesn't every day of the week to me, but God spoke to me very clearly and said, I want you to be a priest. And I knew then I'd got to do something about that. So I did.
Fantastic. I love it that, you know, we do in our normal everyday life. We're just coming home from playing darts and God zaps you and that's the end of it.
Yep. Yep.
Fantastic. So looking back on obviously quite a long career now, what have there been sort of any really significant highs or significant lows during that time?
Yeah, and of course, inevitably, sometimes they're linked. You know, so I've had some varied experience. So early on in my ministry, I had the privilege of both planting a church, and that's always a great gift and a wonder. The lovely thing is about that was just to show how far we've come. So for any younger clergy or folks listening into this, just to make, because of course church planting is so much in our DNA now as a church, it was illegal then technically, because of course we'd you know, you were supposed to be in your building and we hadn't actually caught up. It was a couple of years later. Now, of course, I say it was illegal, the bishops were fully behind the initiative, but strictly speaking, Synod hadn't given its approval at that point. So that in itself is interesting. And while I was there, I was also a hospital chaplain, and that was an enormous privilege. There was a large maternity unit in the site I covered, and you know, that's so some of the lows came then in the sense of, although it was a great privilege, being called to be with parents whose child had just died. Women struggling with major issues around what to do with their situation when they were pregnant and things like that, you know, a huge privilege, but nevertheless, I mean, for the people involved, a real low. And I think when we were in High Wycombe, we had some remarkable experiences, which I could talk about at length, but with that saw our relationship with the folks from a Muslim background grow tremendously during that time. Wonderful experiences. But actually what really made that take off in a big way was two guys in town getting arrested on terrorism charges, and us ringing the Muslim leaders and saying, look, you know, this is not you, we know this, they've been radicalized out of town, come together and let's have a chat. And out of that a great friendship flourished. But of course that was a very difficult time for the community as well. But also, while we were there in Wycombe, some amazing things took place in our church's life. There was an amazing sense of renewal, both around our congregation and others in the town. And I'll say openly to anybody who asks, we realise now, looking back, that what really sparked that off was starting a night shelter. It was when we recognised our call was to serve the dispossessed. Fantastic.
Okay. So obviously this is your second Archdeacon post. And you're Archdeacon in Sutherland, Nottingham initially. What, you know, is this a little bit like having children where you have a go with the first one and have a bit of a practice, and then by the time you get to number two, you know what you're doing? So, you know, tell us, you know, what made you decide to move to Blackburn to do obviously a similar role, but in a different place?
I think there was a sense that there was a right time to move, and I think most people who have been in many walks of life, but certainly the ordained, would recognise that there was a time to move. We got to a particular moment for a range of reasons, but I think it was taking stock, and it wasn't a straightforward, and it wasn't a sudden conclusion. But taking stock, there was a thought that um, you ought to offer something back of that which you've learned. And there is nothing quite like being an archdeacon in all sorts of ways. Um, and actually, I was away at a general synod meeting, and in the space of 2 days, I had two separate conversations with folks I knew, and they both asked me the same question, which was, in effect, would you ever consider being an archdeacon again somewhere else? And then I spoke to somebody else who folks might have heard of, called Michael Everett, who who I knew very well, and he said he was moving on, and he said it's a great diocese, and things took off from there in some ways. That's when I started to take seriously coming here. And the other challenge has been, I think, and I've said this publicly, I've caused a number of clergy to ask the question of themselves, why not move north? Because the needs of the church in the north are great. And I had to ask myself that question. And, clearly there's a diocese here that's got good vision. It's got good leadership. It's got an energy about it. And in all sorts of ways, that and the link with education was a huge attraction. Yeah. And God did the rest, as it were.
Yeah, he makes us go to the places where he wants us to be, whether we want to be there or not, doesn't he? The funny thing is, though, when we get there, we quite often find that actually it's brilliant to be here and that it is the right place for us. So, I think that's what God just does to us, doesn't it? So the post of Archdeacon is an interesting post. Quite often it's portrayed as either being a tyrant or a comical figure, isn't it? Especially, in the media, in films and things. Now, obviously, you're neither of those things, not a tyrant and you're not a comical figure. So tell us a little bit, what does an archdeacon do? Tell us about your role.
Yeah, I think increasingly it really does differ hugely depending on the diocese that you're in and what that diocese is trying to do at a time. So there are some things of commonality, there's no doubt about that. We work closely with church wardens and with clergy around our church buildings and have some responsibilities around that. We have a responsibility and a desire to work as pastors to the clergy and support on those matters. Sometimes that means, of course, that the flip side of that, which is the disciplines of the church have to come in, and we're traditionally seen, the tyrannical bit, as it were, is the bit around keeping order. And I can certainly make an argument for that, whilst at heart, always for 30 years, having sought to be permission giving as deacon and priest. I think that's a really fundamental part of my calling. I hope all of our calling. So I hope I'm a permission giving figure. And I think archdeacons at their best are that. And finding ways that we might be able to do the things that we're seeking to do, taking into account all those things around order and so on within the life of the church. In this diocese, I chair a board, the Board of Education, and I lead on the strand in the diocesan vision around children and young people, which is very dear to my heart, as I said before. So you usually find an archdeacon leading a piece of work like that, but that's what I do here.
Yeah, brilliant. So obviously we've got loads of parents at the moment who are trying to homeschool, which is obviously not the easiest thing to do. I can speak from personal experience with that one. So what sort of advice would you give to parents who are sort of struggling to in this situation, struggling at home with their kids and struggling to sort of maintain some sort of education?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not sure I'm giving advice because I wouldn't feel presumed to do that. But I think you're amazing, and I think I've often told this story, but one of the most awesome things I ever saw in a church building was when I was on sabbatical. I went to a church that I was going to spend some time with, and I just slipped into a pew towards the back, and a mum came in with 4 children. The oldest would have been about 9, the youngest about 4, and She didn't send them out to Sunday school. She kept them engaged in the worship all the way through. And I just, that's just awesome. I could only imagine and aspire to be anything like as competent as she was. So I think, it is just an amazing thing you're doing. I think, the significance of looking in and listening in, of being family together, spending time together. I know it can be difficult. We're talking on a screen now. It can be difficult to drag oneself away from a screen, but spending time together is surely important. Hopefully praying together. There's some great stuff the Church of England's producing at the moment around faith at home and the whole Growing Faith initiative. And of course our own diocese, use some of that stuff too. And also have fun together. I mean, when I was at school, I certainly didn't spend all day, every day, just learning about my lessons. I learned some important things that were nothing to do with formal education. So actually exploring in that way is such a critical part of life, isn't it? And, just being kind to one another is not a bad starting point, is it? And I know that can be really tough sometimes when the pressure's on.
So tell us about the post of Lancaster. Obviously, Archdeacon Michael has already told you how awesome we all are, clearly, and he's not wrong. But tell us, what was it about the post of the Archdeacon of Lancaster that appealed to you particularly? Why Lancaster?
Yeah. No, thank you for that. I think, you were saying a few minutes ago, Anne, about things that surprise you about where God calls you. And I'm not, at one level, I'm not surprised anymore by those things, but you're quite right. So I think I love living here. The minute I saw the place where I live, I fell in love with it. And that's always a good sign because, you're starting out, as you know, we have to live where we're told, as it were. It's the house that's provided. And so if you actually quite like it, that's a good starting point. It's not essential, but it's a good starting point. And I saw potential in what I'd heard, and I saw things that I could build on, and saw things that from my own experience and hopefully giftedness I could bring. I saw a place where folks are up for it and missionally minded and focused on outreach and absolutely critically determined not to just take on the whole managing decline agenda that some seem to want to do. And just look at the way that you have all responded in different ways with creativity and innovation during lockdown. It's been amazing. I mean, you really have not surprised me because I knew you'd do it, but it has been great to watch it happening. So I think that, and once again, the whole thing around education, which is so dear to my heart, children and young people, and just wanting to make the world a better place for them and give them opportunities.
Yeah. So what are your hopes for the future of the church? Obviously, as we come out of lockdown, things are not going to be the same. I think we've all kind of accepted that. But what's your hopes for the future of the church?
I think we've learned quite a bit over the last few weeks about praying. And one of the lovely things is most of the clergy I speak to are, as it were, admitting to one another that we're praying more, which is lovely. But also really importantly, of course, as you've intimated, many lay people are saying they've settled into a way of life and a prayerfulness that they we just must be resolved not to lose. We can all just get so ridiculously busy, and broadly speaking, that's not what it's all about. So actually taking the time to reflect and to listen to God. And, those of us of faith know that, funnily enough, when we pray, stuff happens because God's a faithful God. And if we stop and listen, we're not doing a bad thing at all, are we? So I think something really important about holding on to that sense of prayer. And also watching the way in which we've done community again well. And I've seen that played out in the rural context. Having never been a rural parish priest, I'm now perceived as having something to offer the rural rural from my previous experience in here, and watching that in the rural is great. But it's not just the rural; it's the urban as well. People have just responded incredibly well and had time for one another. And my hope and my prayer would be that the future would be something of that, really, that there's just a greater attentiveness to one another. I think that can only be part of the transforming communities that we talk about. You see, I'm a good archdeacon, and it's to get the strap lines.
You know the strap lines.
No, but seriously, I've always believed passionately in that healthy churches transform communities, and
they do.
Part of that is our calling and what we must be resolved to in the future, which is one of the reasons why, to prove I'm really on message, and I really was saying this just the other day, looking at Vision 2026, it was an attractive vision beforehand, but actually it's perfectly deliverable in whatever comes in the future, which is really important.
And I think that, people are starting to realise, the importance of healthy churches, and that church is not the building, it's the people, and that we are still church even though we're not together. And I think that's really been brought home in quite a. I'd rather we'd not had to learn it this way, but it's a good lesson I think for us to have to learn at the moment.
Well, that's something about redemption, isn't it? God doesn't cause these things to happen, but God can certainly use them and lead us into a depth of relationship that's going to be a blessing.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got 4 questions that we're going to ask everybody.
Okay.
As we're interviewing them. The first one is, when you get to heaven, what's the first question you're going to ask God?
Oh, that's a good one. First question I'm going to ask God. What a good question. Do you know what? I actually don't think I've got a straightforward answer to that, because my experience is the few occasions in life when I've truly entered into something of that real transcendent, overwhelming sense of God's presence, I've not been asking questions. I've been falling on my knees and adoring. And so I'm not sure I will have a straightforward answer to that question, but I do know that it'll be great.
Absolutely. We've got this amazing hope, haven't we? Yeah. So what would you like to be remembered for? Is there something that when you get to the end of your life and the end of your ministry, what would you like to be remembered for?
I'm not too worried how people remember me, or even if they remember me, but if they do think of me, if I've dealt with justice and with mercy and been humble, just to pick off that biblical phrase, then I hope people might think a few of those things, that I've tried to act by the grace of God in those ways.
Yeah, brilliant. So tell us, have you got a favourite Bible passage, and what would it be and why?
Well, I'll give you a clue as to one of them, but the other one is John 10:10, and just about, and it's fascinating that it's right at the heart of the national education. I was talking to a bloke in a pub about just before lockdown. We were on a mission weekend, and I was talking to a bloke in a pub, and I managed to get around to talking about not in a heavy way. I just said, we covered a fair amount of ground, and that's right. There's this passage that just keeps coming back to me. I said, why would you not want more of that? And you can just see there was a moment when he just stopped and thought, yeah, actually, that's a fair point. And sadly, we know that sometimes things of faith, things of religion have not come across in that way. But why would you not want to have life in all its fullness if it's on offer? So it is a favourite passage.
Brilliant. Okay. So have you got a favourite hymn or a favourite song?
Yeah, I've got quite a lot. So, but I will be disciplined about this, because you did warn me you'd ask me about this. So rather than giving you a long list, I'll go for 2 if I can do that, because I'll go for a traditional one and a more contemporary one.
Okay.
Soul of My Saviour would be my traditional one. And yeah, when I left my last parish post in High Wycombe, I was told by the head that the children were going to sing my favourite modern song to me. And I didn't know what my favourite modern song was, but they sang Jesus Be the Centre.
Oh, brilliant.
And it's got to therefore now be my favourite modern song, because it is beautiful, and why would you not want to sing that, Jesus Be the Centre of my life? But yeah, I didn't know it was at the time, but it is now.
Fantastic. Good choices. Oh, well, thank you very much indeed. Thank you for coming and being grilled by us. It's lovely to have you. We're hoping to welcome you soon over in Wesham, and to see you, which will be great as well at some point. But in the meantime, stay safe where you are. Yeah.
You and you. Thanks, Anne.
Thank you.